Let me say something that's going to piss a lot of people off. New Zealand property is fucked. Not temporarily, not cyclically, structurally. And the reason matters. Because if you misunderstand why, you'll keep making the same bad investment decisions. For the last 50 years, property in New Zealand has felt like a one-way bet. Buy a house, hold it, wait, and you get rich. But that wasn't skill, that was a system. Falling interest rates, population growth, increasing incomes. That's what drove prices. Not productivity, not value creation. And now every single one of those tailwinds is reversing. Interest rates are up, demand is dropping, the cost of living is crushing households. And incomes, they haven't kept up. So now you've got a simple problem. People cannot afford the assets they're being told to buy. And when affordability breaks, the system doesn't bend, it resets. Older homeowners are trying to sell into a market that simply will not pay what they expect. We've reached a point where prices are flat and falling in real terms, especially as inflation is about to take off. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. We've been lied to by averages, median house price, average income, affordability ratios, but none of us are average. And those numbers hide the reality that most people are already maxed out. They're choosing between kids, career, or a mortgage. And increasingly, they're not choosing the house. That's not a market going up, that's a market stalling out. Now layer in something deeper. Productivity in New Zealand is low. We don't produce enough. We don't export enough high-value goods. But we've priced our housing like we're a top-tier global economy. And that gap, it has to close. And there are only two ways it closes. Incomes go up massively, or prices come down. And let's be honest, which one is more likely? Let's talk about the part that no one wants to touch. The government. Kāinga Ora owns around 70,000 homes. Think about that. How does a government end up as the largest property investor in the country? This didn't happen overnight. This is 50 years of policy failure. Instead of fixing supply, they accumulated assets. Instead of enabling markets, they replaced them. And now we've got tens of billions of dollars tied up in housing, generating low or negative returns. That is not an investment, it is dead capital. And it gets worse. The entire balance sheet, roughly $30 billion in net assets, relies on house prices staying high. So if property prices fall, the government's borrowing power gets hit hard. The government relies on its balance sheet to borrow and to refinance, which means they're incentivized to support high house prices. Even if it makes the problem worse long term, that means it's not a free market. It's a conflicted one. And that's how you trap a system, because the market needs to correct. But the largest player in the market can't afford for it to do so. So zoom out. You've got a government sitting on 70,000 houses while the private market is starved of affordable supply. You've got taxpayer capital locked in low return assets instead of being deployed into productive businesses and infrastructure, or even better, returning it to the taxpayers. Someone needs to campaign on selling all 70,000 houses over 5 to 10 years before the market crashes. Kāinga Ora can still provide housing support, it just doesn't need to own the houses. It would be cheaper and more free market. And on top of all that, you've got a public service that's grown faster than the economy supporting it. Since 2006, we have doubled our public service numbers, which is ludicrous because tax take did not double and the population did not double. More people on payroll than the tax base can sustainably afford. The public service does not create wealth, it redistributes it. Benefits are rising, debt is increasing, productivity is stagnant. At some point, the math stops working. And when the math stops working, something has to adjust. Either the government shrinks, it sells assets, gets out of the way, or the system corrects anyway. Just faster and more painfully. That's the reality. So what happens next? You either get a slow, grinding decline over decades or a fast, painful reset. Either way, the outcome is the same. property is no longer a growth asset. It's a capital preservation asset at best. At worst, it's a leveraged liability. In a system that's losing momentum, it's a bottomless pit of maintenance, management, and tax. And capital gains will come. Capital gains taxes will come from Labour and the Greens. When they get into power, those taxes are going up and they're never going to come down. The wealthy will always pay for everyone else through one type of tax or another. Now contrast this with something else. Local businesses. Cash flow, control, pricing power. You're not waiting for the market to go up. You're creating value in an environment where costs are rising, demand is tightening, capital is uncertain. Control becomes everything. Let me simplify this. You cannot control interest rates, government policy, or housing cycles, but you can control the business you own, the cash flow you generate, and the value you build. And that's the shift from passive speculation to active ownership, because the next phase of this cycle is not about riding assets up, it's about building things that work, even when the system doesn't. And that's exactly why I created Business Apprentice, because instead of hoping property goes back to what it was, we focus on what actually works now. Real businesses, real cash flow, real leverage. And if you want to understand how to do that, step by step, I break it down in the workshop. businessapprentice.co.nz/workshop, because the truth is simple. The old game worked. This is the new game. And most people are still playing by the old rules.